Okay, so this is like a story, I guess, that I wanted to tell, but I kept fucking forgetting. So here I am, and I don't have like a script, so this is just gonna be probably a disaster. So I'm gonna tell the story, and then also drink my tea that I have here. And I don't know, I've got some like background footage of me, you know, trying to find appropriate colors for enemies in a difficulty I'm working on in DRG. Anyway, so uh, the story, I guess, begins with the fact that when I got to college, I liked to take like intro classes on subjects that I didn't like really know much about. Either that or like I knew about it, but I knew about it like outside of school. I wanted to try something that was like formally educating in that sort of sense. So, like for example, I took an economics intro class because I always heard people making fun of economics majors and whatever. So I was like, okay, well, is it true? And I took the intro class, and yes, it's true. Everyone in there was genuinely dumb as rocks, and it was maybe the stupidest class I've ever taken. But this beautiful little story is not about economics. It's about a psychology intro class that I took. So the psychology intro class that I took had two parts. It had a lecture part and it had a lab part. And the lab, it was different because I take a lot of physics classes because I'm a physics major. Uh, so labs, and I imagine this is also how it works for like chemistry and biology. Labs, you go in, you have an experiment, you like set it up, you do whatever, you get some results, you write it up, done. And our labs are 4 hours, at least for physics, chemistry, biology. This psychology lab was 2 hours. So you've got the lectures, I think it was 3 times a week, and then this lab 1 time a week. And this lab was 2 hours. And this lab, it didn't consist of like doing any experiments. It was just like, here's a reaction test, and it's like you do the reaction test, and then you fuck off after 30 minutes, and then you leave. Or it's like, here's some data, do an analysis on it, and then you do that for like 20 minutes, and then you leave. But the final project for this lab was our own study. And this is where the issue comes in, because this was a group project, and we would have to present it. And obviously, like, the teacher didn't fucking want 7 million presentations. There were, like, I don't know, 15 people in our lab, because the original psychology class was split into a couple of labs, because our lecture hall is big, but the lab room was small. Whatever, unimportant. And basically, it's a group project. And I was put in a group with these two girls. And the first bad sign was that they just wouldn't shut the fuck up. Whenever we did anything, they would just talk about anything. And so before we even started the group project, there was just one thing of like, we need to practice using this like data form whatever thing. And so I calculated all the numbers we needed to put in, and then they just needed to put the values into the thing. And so there's like 20 values or something. And so I give them one value, they type it in, and they start fucking talking. And they keep talking. And realistically, I should have just been more confrontational and just told them to get on with it and finish the work. But I waited for them to ask for the next number, even though I had all of it calculated. It wasn't difficult. But I waited for them to ask for the next number, and then I would give them the next number. And then they would talk again. And it was unbearable. This lab, although there's 2 hours dedicated to it, you always left before those 2 hours were done. Usually it didn't even take an hour. But as soon as I started this group project, we were taking up the entire 2 hours every week. And we were the only group that did that. All of the other groups left way before us, and it was miserable. And then the group project itself began. We had to pick like a topic to research, or not research, but do a study on. So we threw out some ideas, and I think I was the one that said to do something like sleep related. And they were like, "Ah, yeah, okay, good idea." And then whatever, skip some time. The next lab, they together decided to change the thing from like just sleep to like naps. And I was like, okay, well, fucking whatever, I don't care. And it's like, okay, naps. So what exactly are we going to study with these naps? And they wanted to see if there's a correlation between taking naps and I think grades, or it was something. It was a bunch of different things that they wanted to compare with taking naps. But the stupid part was they didn't just want to do just the general population. They wanted to go, ah, yes, we shall survey student athletes, because us student athletes, well, you know, we have to wake up for our practices, and then that means that we have less sleep, and so we have to take naps. And I wanted to fucking kill these two. Every word they said was stupid, because I don't like do athletics in the school. I do athletics outside the school, but it's not important because I sleep less than them anyway, and whatever sport they did do, I would have beaten them at. So already I thought they were complete morons. But then the disaster began when we actually started working on this project. So supposedly we would have a survey, we'd send it out. Now the issue with them making it so hyper-specific, since I commute rather than staying on campus, I didn't really know anyone. I only knew the people in the physics and math classes, since I'm mostly taking just those classes. And I didn't have contact with the 7 million student athletes or whatever. And clearly, they didn't either. But what I realized is that, first off, they made 2 different surveys to send out to people. And they didn't, it was Google Forms. So these surveys were in Google Forms, and they didn't, first off, they didn't realize that the other was making a survey, even though we talked about it. We talked about who would make the survey, and then they both made it anyway. And after that, we couldn't merge the info because they had different questions. They had different questions on these surveys. So neither of them knew what the other was doing. And then both of these people surveyed like groups of people, but there was some overlap. So even if they were the same questions, we wouldn't be able to combine it. It was so bad. But then it got worse, because then we had to, you know, start looking at this information and be like, okay, what can we analyze? And the downside of this disaster was that we ended up with 8 replies. It was like 8, maybe 9, something like that. It was in the range of 10, which is such a low, like, sample that it's basically worthless. But at this point, we couldn't change anything. So it's like, okay, well, let's look at whatever our best result is. And I suggest that, okay, well, we can take what our best result is and then present that. And they gave this blank look to me. The only way I can describe it is with that one picture of, like, supposedly a college party, and there's this blonde girl holding a red plastic cup looking at the camera with a disgusted face. You've probably seen the picture. That's how both of them looked at me. And it's like I said something stupid. But no. So they wanted to use all of the data and be like, present all of it. The issue with that being was like, well, we took this test, we found no correlation. We took this test, we found no correlation. And it's like, what are we even fucking presenting here? And that would be a good question, because the next thing we needed to plan out was like what we are presenting. So we had to do a write-up. So we had to make a presentation and a write-up. It's like to pretend that it's like a real study. this write-up, oh my god, we shared a document, and we would work on it. And by we, I mean I would work on it. Because for some reason, I was the only one writing anything in this doc. And I thought, man, these idiots are worthless. I'm doing all of the work here. And it got to a point where we're like 2 weeks away from presentation, and I have like half of this thing done. I don't know what the fuck they're doing, and we haven't started our presentation. So I emailed the professor, and I'm like, hey, I don't know what the fuck's happening in my group. They're not like doing anything, and overall it's all disorganized. And so the professor calls us into like a group, and she's like, you guys need to cooperate better. And it's like, oh my god, I can't with anyone here. As it turned out, both of them, despite there being a shared document that they made and were aware of, both of them started their own fucking document to write this. And because they did that, again, we couldn't fucking combine it because we all had the same sections done. It was so terrible. And so then we had to immediately after this, we were like, okay, today we are going to finish this document and then start working on the presentation because we're fucked at this point. So we go into like the lounge of this building that we're in, of the science building. And we go into the lounge and we start writing on this fucking paper. And because this is like a psychology class, realistically, it's something that you can finish in a day. So we just sat down and we just finished it. And the next thing to do was the presentation. Oh, the presentation went just about how you would expect. Every slide was fucking ugly. All of the information was worthless, again, because our study was fucking worthless. And then they were like, okay, well, now we get to split up who presents what. And it's like, really? Who presents what? Okay, I'll present the fucking intro slide because it's got the most substance. And so we gave the presentation and we went last. And last is great because we get to finish strong. And the entire thing was a disaster. Our presentation lasted maybe 3 minutes. It was terrible. But the reason why this bothers me so much, because I've had other bad group projects. The reason why this bothers me is because, first off, the lab was a big portion of the class grade. And even though I was doing fantastic in the class, in the lecture, because again, it's fucking intro to psychology, you don't even like need to go to the class to pass perfectly. I was doing just fine, but the lab was 50% of the class, which is fine, because again, the lab, if you can call it that, are just like activities, basically. And it's like, oh, you do the reaction test, you leave. Perfect score. But this last fucking group project was a big portion of the lab grade, which means it was a big portion of the final psychology class grade. And we did so bad that I ended up getting a C in the class, which is still the worst grade on my report card by far. And that was when I decided that I'm not going to take any more intro classes. Because unless you're in math or you're in physics, and probably maybe chemistry, then I think you're just a moron. And I can't work in these group projects. At least in physics, everyone is kind of competent, and the labs make sense, and the grading works. But this psychology project scarred me for life. And I have no respect to psychologists anymore. As I mentioned, like with economists, I don't respect them either. A psychologist, I also don't respect. It was so bad. Oh my god. It was terrible.